Can you imagine a simple neighborhood fight turning into flashing police sirens right outside someone's home? Shocking, right? But that's exactly what happened when an HOA president, better known as the neighborhood Karen, decided she had the power to destroy one family's peace. She thought she could call the cops, humiliate a woman, and show the whole neighborhood she was untouchable. But what she didn't know was that one single card, one single ID, would freeze her cold and turn the entire situation upside down. This isn't just a story about neighbors arguing. This is about power, respect, and a dramatic twist that left an entire street in silence. Imagine the shock of everyone watching as the very woman Karen tried to crush revealed something that changed everything in seconds. What did the cops do? How did the neighborhood react? And why did Karen's face go pale in front of everyone? Stay with us till the very end, because every second of this story will pull you deeper and deeper. And trust me, you won't believe how it ends. But before we dive in, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching this video from? It all started on a quiet morning when Daniel and his wife Emily finally packed the last of their boxes. They were moving out of their HOA-controlled neighborhood, a place that had become more of a prison than a home. For months, they had endured constant letters, absurd fines, and endless complaints from Karen, the head of the HOA. Karen had made it her mission to police everything: how tall the grass grew, how long a car was parked, even the color of the flowers Emily planted. Emily tried to be polite, tried to smile and brush it off, but Daniel could see the way it drained her. The neighborhood felt suffocating, and every walk outside was shadowed by Karen's critical stare. Finally, when the lease on a new house outside the HOA was signed, Emily felt free for the first time in years. But freedom, they soon learned, was not something Karen would allow easily. The moving truck arrived early, and as boxes stacked up by the driveway, Emily felt a weight lifting. Her heart raced with relief, but Karen's curtains twitched across the street. That familiar glare followed their every move. Karen couldn't stand the thought of anyone breaking the order of her precious HOA. So when Emily stepped into her car to drive a final load to the new house, Karen stormed out, shouting accusations. She claimed Emily was abandoning responsibilities, that she hadn't filed the right paperwork, that she still owed the HOA exit fees. Emily, exhausted but calm, told her they were done, the house was sold, and Karen had no say in their lives anymore. Karen's face turned red. She muttered threats about consequences. And within an hour, as Emily returned from the new house, she was greeted not by peace, but by flashing blue lights. 2 police cars idled in front of the driveway. Karen stood proudly with her arms crossed, explaining to the officers that Emily was trespassing and stealing property. Emily froze, stunned by the absurdity. Daniel rushed outside, his heart pounding, trying to make sense of it. The officers, serious and professional, asked Emily for identification. Karen smirked like she had finally won. The tension in the air was sharp, neighbors peeking through blinds, whispering about what was happening. Emily reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet. Her hand was steady, her expression calm, but inside she felt the weight of injustice pressing down. She handed the officer her military ID. The moment the officer saw it, his tone shifted completely. Respect replaced suspicion, and Karen's grin faltered. The cop looked back at Karen, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if realizing the real troublemaker wasn't Emily at all. For the first time, Karen looked unsure. Her confidence slipped, her smugness draining away as the officer addressed Emily with newfound respect, asking gentle, clarifying questions, making it clear she wasn't in any trouble. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. She hadn't expected this. She thought she could humiliate Emily, trap her with lies, but instead she was the one frozen in place, her authority collapsing in front of the entire neighborhood. Emily stood taller, her dignity shining brighter than Karen's cruelty, and Daniel realized in that moment the story was only beginning. The silence after Emily handed over her military ID felt heavier than any shouting match. The officer studied it carefully, then looked back at her with the kind of respect that comes from understanding sacrifice. "Ma'am," he said gently, "thank you for your service." Those words were like a stone dropping into still water, rippling through the crowd of watching neighbors. Karen's eyes darted nervously, her earlier boldness vanishing. She stammered, insisting that Emily was lying, that the ID must be fake, that she had connections in the city who would verify her story, but the officers didn't even glance at her. Their focus was on Emily, on making sure she was treated fairly. Daniel clenched his fists, torn between anger and relief. Anger that his wife had been humiliated like this, relief that the truth was finally shining through. Emily stood tall, her voice calm, as she explained the move, the paperwork, and the constant harassment they had faced. Each word cut deeper into Karen's crumbling facade. The officers nodded, realizing the complaint was baseless. Then one officer turned to Karen, his expression firm. "Ma'am, calling the police to make false reports is a serious matter. This could have consequences." Karen froze, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to argue, but the weight of authority pressed down on her. The neighbors watching from windows and porches had seen everything. Her smug entrance, her loud accusations, and now her silent downfall. Karen had thrived on power, on making people fear her position in the HOA. But in this moment, her power looked small, almost pitiful. Emily didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her quiet strength spoke louder than Karen's loudest tantrum. She thanked the officers respectfully, and when they assured her she was free to continue moving, she smiled with gratitude. Karen, meanwhile, shuffled backward toward her house, her face pale. Her perfect image, the control she clung to so tightly, had shattered in front of the community she ruled with an iron fist. Daniel and Emily went back to their work, carrying boxes, loading cars, their movements steady and purposeful. Each trip felt lighter, not just because the boxes were gone, but because the burden of fear had been lifted. Karen stayed hidden behind her curtains now, no longer brave enough to step outside. And the whispers of the neighbors began to change. People who once stayed silent about her bullying now realized they had seen the truth. Days later, when the move was complete, Daniel drove Emily past their old street one last time. The house they had left behind stood quietly, but the memory of what happened there would never fade. Emily looked out the window, her expression calm but thoughtful. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes people try to break you just because they see your strength, but in the end, truth always shows." Daniel nodded, proud beyond words. He had watched his wife face unfairness, face harassment, face public humiliation, and she had handled it with the quiet courage of someone who knew who she was. Karen's power had ended the moment Emily revealed her identity, not just as a homeowner, not just as someone leaving the HOA, but as someone who had given years of her life in service to something greater. The story spread quietly through the neighborhood. Some neighbors even reached out later, apologizing for not standing up to Karen sooner, admitting they too had felt trapped. Karen's reign of control weakened, and eventually, new leadership was voted into the HOA. People had seen too much to ignore it any longer. For Daniel and Emily, life outside the HOA was everything they had hoped for. Peaceful mornings, friendly neighbors, a sense of real freedom. And though they carried the memory of that day, it didn't haunt them. Instead, it reminded them of resilience, of dignity, of the simple truth that bullies only win if you let them. Karen, on the other hand, remained a shadow in the corner of her own neighborhood, a reminder to everyone else that fear loses its grip the moment courage steps forward. And so the story of the day Karen called the cops only to be silenced by a single military ID became something more than just gossip. It became a lesson in respect, in standing tall, and in how quickly false power melts away when faced with real honor. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for latest uploads. Thanks for watching.